Pessoal, bom dia. Hoje nós estamos aqui com um convidado bastante especial, é o Jonas Lorentzen. Ele é músico, ele é vocalista na banda Heilung e também no seu projeto o Nebala, e também interpretou o personagem Einstein em O Homem do Norte. Jonas, welcome to the Wacky World channel. It's a big pleasure receiving you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start to asking you, how did you start your interest for the Nordic sound, for the Viking Age music? How do you start this passion for this side of the music?
Of how I started the passion for this type of music, this
Yeah,
Nordic spiritually
music.
inspired and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I suppose to start from the very beginning. I mean, I've been a musician all my life, as far as I can remember. Really. It was in my family. Well, my whole family is musical in some way, at different capacities, and so it's always just been a part of my life, music in general. So I don't. It wasn't something that I chose. It kind of just was there always. So it was just something I did. Just like whatever else you do in your life. So and in terms of the whole Nordic thing, I've always been interested in religion as well, ever since I can remember as well. I've always thought it was a fascinating, topic, and just I think in general, just being interested in what it means to be alive and what it means to exist, and what it means to exist in this strange universe on this planet, and where everything is like, you're just thrown into it, and what is this all about? So I've always been interested in that. So I read, like, when I was a kid, I would read Nordic mythology books. My grandfather was a priest in a Protestant church, but was just generally interested in religion. So he had tons of books and so on. So I would go and I would read mythology books from him and so on. And then actually, to make this sort of make sense, I had an aunt who was traveling a lot in India in the end of the 70s and the early 80s, and became a part of this whole. Do you know about the cult of Osho, of Bhagwan? Have you heard of that?
I think no, no.
So there was a very famous cult in the late 80s, in late 70s and early 80s, which was called the Rajneeshis or the Bhagwanis or the Osho followers or whatever. So he had many names. It was an Indian guru who there's actually a fantastic Netflix series on it called Wild Wild Country, which I can really recommend people to see. But either which way, she went to India at a very early age, when she was young, and became a part of this whole cult and Indian spirituality and so on. And then she would come back in the summers in Denmark and live in the family summer house. And then she would bring all her weird trinkets and all the different stuff from India and all the spirituality from there. And I would see that growing up and be very fascinated by it. And later in my life, I so happened to fall in love with an Indian woman and started going to India a lot, and would go for silent retreats in Buddhist monasteries and that sort of thing, and listen to music which was spiritually informed. So in the Tibetan system, for instance, they have tons of different chants, and they have the throat singing. So the first time I heard throat singing was in India, where the monks are sitting in a little temple doing their recitations and strange bells and all that. And I was so fascinated with this world of sound, this world of sound that was aimed at a sort of spiritual practice. And in around 2015, 2016, I had a studio at my good friend Christopher studio, Christopher Maria from Heilung, the singer and the main musician from Heilung. And he was working on Heilung at that time. And at some point I was sitting and working on some stuff in my little studio, and he came and he said, like, "Oh, come, Jonas, listen to this music that I'm doing with this crazy shaman, German shaman," and so on. And I would sit and I think at the first track I heard it was Alpha de Hakir, um, which is one of the tracks off the first Heilung album. So this was before it was released and everything. And I heard it, and I heard the throat singing, and I heard that Nordic vibe being transmitted through this chanting. And I was so fascinated by it. I was like, this is so, I recognize this from the stuff that I've heard in India, but still it has that Nordic feeling. It connects to something which is my roots, which, you know, if anyone knows anything about the nature religions and the old gods and so on, you know, that was with the introduction of Christianity and that whole governing system of Christianity, of Catholicism, was removed from Europe, more or less, you know, was at least pushed extremely into obscure corners, you know. So it's not something when we grow up in Scandinavia or Germany or any kind of European country for that matter, we don't grow up with that knowledge, because it has been, I wouldn't say lost, because people are breathing new life into it, so it can't be completely lost, but it was at least subdued to a point where it wasn't really something that is part of our makeup growing up in Europe. So seeing that being, you know, coming to life again through music, or hearing that was a great moment for me. And then later on, of course, I was asked to join Heilung for live shows and so on, and got to play with them, and became more and more inspired to myself make music that I wanted to hear, that was informed by these ancient ideas and spiritual ideas from the Nordics. So that's how Nebala was conceived, you could say. And of course, then, as many people will hear, if they hear the Nebala music, it is very inspired by Eastern and Indian soundscapes and so on as well. So it's just a kind of like amalgamation of everything that have inspired me throughout my life.
Oh, that's very interesting. I think your sound is very different because you make this combination with the sounds of some music like Indian music with some aspects with the Nordic music, and that's a lot interesting sound. I think it's a project very nice
Thank you much.
to review.
Obrigado.
And thank you. So for we start how we can start to comprehend the Nordic music, how we can definitive um the Nordic music. We can say that we can have the sounds of the Viking Age, but we don't have so much how the sound look like, but we try to make an interpretation of that sound. How do you can describe that to make music based on the Viking Age?
But I mean, just to get some obvious things out of the way, obviously you can't actually. I mean, in the sense that if you were to say it one to one, how do you make music that sounds like music like games? That project is impossible. That's impossible, because obviously we don't have anything. We don't even have anything written down in terms of notation that we can interpret in that kind of way. You do have some things from like the early medieval periods, you know, but that's when everything has been Christianized. And actually, one of the ways you can think about Viking harmonics and stuff like that is actually by looking at what was made illegal. So in the early with the entrance of Christianity onto the European mindset, so you had all these Pythagorean ideas about music, basically, which were sort of what are the different intervals between notes that are okay and that serve God in the best way. So I don't need to maybe dive into that too much, because that gets too technical, but you can sort of see that, okay, now these different intervals, it was made illegal to sing these intervals or these types of scales and so on. And therefore you can maybe think, okay, the reason why they're being made illegal is probably because someone is doing it, but it's not what the Christian musicians and so on would find to be the most pure way of making music. So sometimes you can think about it in that sense by saying what was disallowed is then probably what was actually there. But to go from there to actually know how they would make music, what they would think of scales, what they would think of rhythms and so on, forget about it, right? But what you can do is, of course, you can do the thing that Einar from Vadruna and Heilung and other bands like that, and even to a certain degree with Nebala as well, even though I probably am a little less Puritan than some of these bands are, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that I think the thing that is common for all of us is that we try to do what the Vikings probably would do, and what people living in Northern European countries would have done back then, and that is to be inspired by nature. There's so many sounds in nature, when you walk around. There's wind sounds, there's there's little stones falling, there's the sound of water, there's all these different things. And I think if you allow yourself to be inspired by the nature around you, the music is going to reflect that. So I think a lot of the so-called Viking music or Nordic spiritually driven music, it's a reflection of the nature around us. That's why you get this kind of vibe of something Nordic. So it's kind of ephemeral in a way. It's difficult to put into words really what it is, but I think it is that. And trying to think of cycles and the different elements, the darkness that is ruling this hemisphere for many months of the year, right? That does have an effect on how you express something sonically as well. So I think it's a lot about that, really. And so it's more like finding a way of approaching creativity than it is trying to find the actual way that Vikings would make music, because that's an impossible project. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's a very good point that you bring us, because sometimes people, when listening some sound like Varuna or like Helum, they think, oh, this is Viking song, this is like but is this is a new interpretation of the of a new song that was not exactly like the of that past, because we don't have so how don't have any can I say any proof that the sounds like that, or we don't have
Exactly.
a clue about that time. And that's a very very nice that you point about that.
And I think also just to add to it, like, even though there are elements, I think in again, if I am to compare myself to the two big ones there, Vardruna and Heilung, I'd say the elements that we all share, which is that there is a certain level of academic research practices involved in making this kind of music. I'm not exactly sure how Heilung and Vardruna does it, but I think it's probably not too dissimilar to my own method, which is basically I do a lot of research before I start writing the music. I do a lot of research on what is going to inform this album. What is the world that I'm trying to build within which I'm going to express something, whether it is sacred sexuality as on the first album, or if I can say a little bit about the second album, which we're writing at the moment, which is going to be more inspired by different kinds of rites of passages, because that's, Passover rituals were extremely important in ancient Europe, and is still important in traditional societies around the world. The idea of there being these cardinal points in a life that needs to be marked in a certain way with a ritual or a practice or so on. So I do a lot of research to sort of research about these different rites of passages, and then I have this world of spiritual ideas and concepts and so on, and from there you can sort of drag out and put that into a creative process of sorts. And that's also what I think is extremely important, because even though we have these academic approaches to music, when we go in and make music, when I go in and make music with Nebala, it's not an academic project anymore. It's a full-on creative project, right? Like what has to come out has to be creative and emotion-based and so on and so forth. Whereas if you were to really try to recreate Viking music, it would be a purely academic, technical project. Do you understand what I mean? The difference between those two things?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
it's very clear now.
Okay.
I think you have a name for that. Is I think is archaeomusicology, or
Archaeomusicology.
I think is that.
See.
I studied based in archaeology and music in
All
that
right.
period.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's an area that they recreated the instruments on based in some things that was in some researches around in Scandinavia or in other countries that the Vikings was making their travels.
Mm-hmm.
And what is we can consider the how can I say, the most important instruments for creating some songs like that. We have the shamanic drum. We have
Yeah.
sometimes the use of the horns for make the sound.
Mm-hmm.
What that we can consider the important instruments for create, and what's the we can say the documents that we can create in music, some sagas or some parts of the Edda. What you can consider important for creating music like that?
That's a good question. In terms of instrumentation, if you were to set out to try to do like a pure Viking, it has to be only from that period, or what would have been available. You're right. You have the drums. I mean, you can. It's actually, they do say that they have actually never found any drums from the Viking age, like particularly dated to that time. But that's again makes sense, because the wood would just disappear in 1,000 years, and be nothing left of it, and skin for that matter as well. So it makes sense. But we know that the Sami cultures have had drums all the time, and it would also be just ridiculous to suggest that this would be the only place in the entire world where drums were not invented, because it literally would be, because we know we've been playing drums since thousands and thousands of years as humanity, right? So that would be completely silly to suggest. So yeah, so drums for sure, different shamanic drums, frame drums, and so on. And then there would be things like now you mentioned horns, like ram's horns and so on, which are horns that again you can play overtones with these horns, right? They can play natural tones, which are usually in a kind of major scale. And then then you have things like lure, which is an overtone horn, which is we know that people have been using since the Bronze Ages, which is a long horn. So there's a Nebala, which we use a lot, which is on the Alagabia, for instance, the first track of the album, where Shell plays this beautiful Nebala, which is a long wooden horn wrapped with birch bark. It's very pretty, very beautiful. So that would be one instrument you can use as well. I would say everything like all kinds of things that can make sounds which are natural. So like wooden sticks against each other, rocks maybe grinding. Heilung, I know Christopher used a lot of time on recording fire and water and wind, and then even manipulating those kind of sounds. And because again, the wind will have a lot of tones in it. So what Christopher does, which I think is super cool, is that he goes in and he separates the tones from the wind itself, and he drags them out. He can do that digitally, right? Like on a machine, he can do that. And then he can actually pitch them up and down. He can make it sound like a bass sound, like a kind of thing that goes like that. but it's actually a wind sound, so things like that, is really cool to do as well. We on the first album, Nebala, there's a track called Manch Gamana, which is basically we took a big drill and drilled into ice to get that sound of grinding ice that's grinding up and down. That was actually to illustrate Odin when he bores into the mountain in the story of the Mead of Poetry. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he drills into a mountain so he can turn himself into a snake to go inside. So it was to illustrate him drilling into the mountain. Things like that. It's just your creativity that sets the boundaries for it. But that's one thing you can do to sort of to create an ancient vibe, I suppose. That's one thing you can do. But again, these are just creative ways of creating that world, right? Like it's again not like really Viking music as such. Sorry, I lost my thread a little bit. Your question was again.
It was which instruments
Yes.
we can have some importance for creating this type of music, and what type of documents or something that we have
The
to
documents, yes,
create
yes,
the lyrics for the
yeah.
songs.
That was the second part that I forgot. Yeah, and also like, of course, I can't like talk about instruments without mentioning the tagelharpa and the lyre, which are two medieval instruments that, again, are they Viking? Are they not Viking? I don't know, but yeah, we can guess that they might have had things like that, little handheld harps, which is what a lyre is. It makes sense that they would have had something like that. How they tuned them and so on, we don't know. Again, maybe someone brought it from the Middle East and it was tuned in some kind of like Middle Eastern scale, and when he came back, it was out of tune, and he had to tune it again, and he didn't know what tuning it was in, so he just tuned it in whatever way the musician felt was right. Who knows? Who knows how these things. So again, I think you're just allowing yourself to be free with these things. And for instance, on Safyan, we tuned the lyre in a raga, which is an Indian way of tuning. I can't remember exactly which raga scale it was, but that's an Indian way of tuning. So, anyways. I digress. But in terms of textual stuff, like my process was again trying to find the different textual material that had to do with fertility or sexuality or fertility rituals and so on and so forth. And of course, I enlisted the help of Matthias Nordvik from the University of Boulder, Colorado, who is a powerhouse in everything that has to do with knowledge of pre-Christian religions and so on. So we had a lot of fun finding the right different textural material. We used quite a lot from the Havamal. The Havamal has a lot of things that are related to sexuality and to fertility and so on. We used a lot of stuff from there was one track that was built entirely around the story of Skirnir and Freyr sending his what would you call it, what is the word for it, well, he's basically, I see it a bit like in the Indian system that you have this idea of avatars. So you have the main gods and they have avatars that they can send out, which is basically, for instance, Hanuman, which is the monkey god, he's an avatar of Shiva. So he's an aspect of Shiva. He is a deity in his own right, but he's an aspect of Shiva. The same way I think Skirnir can be seen as a aspect of Freyr. Do you see what I mean? Also because Skirnir means the shining one. So it makes sense if Freyr is a kind of sky god and he's a kind of fertility god and he maybe is associated a little bit with the sun or something like that. It would make sense that he sends his rays to go down to the earth goddess Gerder. So you know the story, right? So he sends Skirnir together to woo her so that he can bring Gerder back to Freyr and they can have sex in a field of barley or something like that. But that story is extremely inspiring and strange and weird, and there's all kinds of sexual violence in it, and curses and infertility and all these different things. So that was one story that I built a whole track around. And then, of course, we also found a lot of goddess names, ancient goddess names from the Rhineland in Germany from year 500, which are these ancient fertility goddesses names, which have been lost to history. No one worships these deities anymore, but they have such beautiful names and such beautiful meanings attached to their names. So we did some tracks which were basically just chanting these names, Alagabia being one, and Blotha, the last track on the album, also being one. So these two tracks basically were inspired purely by goddess names and chanting these goddess names. Again, I think it's really up to anyone who wants to start a journey with this kind of music and try to make music that's inspired by ancient Nordic mythology and religions and so on. Just go crazy, there's so much material, there's so much stuff you can dig into and find inspiration from and so on. And I wouldn't worry too much about whether it's accurate and all that kind of stuff, or whether your particular interpretation of something is accurate. For instance, my interpretation of the meat of poetry was based on what I had in my baggage, or my luggage, which was a lot of spiritual ideas from India. So, for instance, the fact that I'll illustrate what I mean. The fact that Odin bores into the mountain as a snake, has sex with Gunnlod, who is again a kind of earth goddess or a underworld goddess, if you will, in order to gain the meat of poetry so that he can fly out of the mountain as an eagle and regurgitate the creative force back up to the world, right? If you look at systems of like Kundalini rising, which is like a yoga meditation, right? You sit down and then you focus on the groin energy and you channel that energy up through and out through your crown chakra. If you ever see a symbolic depiction of that practice, it's a snake curling up, turning into an eagle on top. I found that extremely interesting. And I thought, okay, well, that's imagery, that symbolism is there in the story of the meat of poetry. It's not described as that, it's not a yogic position, but it's still the concept of a snake coming into an eagle, right? Just in a mythological, narrativized version. So I was super inspired by that, and I took inspiration from that, and that also reflected in the song, that it was this kind of this little bit of like, and then some tension, and then some release at the end, some ecstatic release at the very end, yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question in a way.
Yes, you say things very exactly to the question. I think you answer very well, because you
Obrigado.
explain a lot about these questions about the songs, about how we can use some these instruments, because sometimes we don't have idea how types of instruments are really used in the Vikings, but we can interpret it using new instrument or medieval instruments that was playing this music. Example that you say, the tale arpa is one of the most famous usage for compositions, and famous in some medias that they put some scouts. They generally they put scouts with tale arpa. It's
Yeah,
a figure most used in this type of perspective.
sure.
And how you consider, how project you consider that was most challenging to compose, Heilung or your Nebala? All this.
Oh, I just need to be clear. When it comes to Hylam, with Heilung, I was never composing as such with them, because Heilung is the three, like they're Kai, Maria, and Christopher. So Kai is the shaman, the one that is in the center with the big regalia on. Maria is the white, what is again the like angel of death type character, and Christopher is I would say he's more like a chieftain character. If you wanted to like mythologize them a bit, I would say that's he's like the chieftain. He's the the one who keeps everything together, you know. And that's how they have chosen to have their structure. So it's them creating everything, and everyone else is adding on top, you know. So that's what I was doing when I was with Heilung. I was adding stuff on top of what they had already created. I was adding to it, if you will, lending my energy to that entity that they have forced upon the world, thrusted upon the world, and which was a fantastic experience. It was extremely like the 2 years I was with Heilung I learned so much. I learned so much about letting go, because being a musician and being a trained musician, there's a lot of sometimes you put a lot of constraint on yourself in order to be perfect, in order to be sonically sound, and sonically sound looks interesting. Du blanc entendre, but nevertheless, the point is that with Heilung I was adding to them. So like in Hamar Hippia, which is the last track there of it, there's a big passage in the middle where I was sort of allowed to let loose and to improvise on top of this, on top of everything that was going on in the background. So Heilung was challenging, but it was also liberating. It was liberating for my voice, really having to sit down and really practice to do the throat singing and so on, and see what that would do to my voice, and basically just broadening my horizon in what is possible to do sonically. The Heilung was a great experience for that. The Northmen, let me leave that for the last bit. With Nebala, it was I would say a greater challenge in terms of, you know, because obviously this was me. This was all coming from me. I was the one, how do you say, that was steering that ship, you know, where I was maybe a mariner when I was with Heilung. I was now the captain, you know, so that's a different thing altogether. And was a great challenge, but it was a joyful challenge. It was so playful. I was writing the last third part of the album. I was writing together with Shell, and then Shell also helped to arrange some of the other things. But Shell Broughton, who I think you know who is, or do you know who he is? Shell Broughton?
Who?
Shell Broughton? Or Kjell Broughton? Do you know who that is? You should listen to him. You should listen to his stuff. You really should. It's great. I'll send you the link afterwards. He's a fantastic musician. Also plays a lot of different instruments. And we were writing, and basically writing and mixing and finishing up all the other stuff that I had written. That's a different story. But through COVID, this album was written through COVID, so it ended up being written in a location in London, another location close to Oslo, and another location close to Bergen. It became like a kind of stitched together ragdoll of all kinds of things. But Shell and I, we finished it off together, and it was a great collaboration with him. And he and I would just play. He would just have all these different instruments, and we would just play around. We'd go, okay, we would go into the studio in the morning and go like, okay, today we want to write a song about the Mother Earth goddesses, the fertility goddesses that grants us everything. We want to. It has to be a song that reflects gratitude for the feminine energy and so on. And that was literally what we went in with. Okay, so how does that sound? Or maybe there's a violin that has these two notes in the beginning. Okay, fine. And then we just started adding on top. It was literally just play, and there was never a dry day. There was never a day where we got into like, oh, it's difficult to express or whatever. We just went with it. Oh,
Um,
what happened? Oh, sorry.
yeah.
No. No, sorry, yeah, no, it's cut out for me.
He is from some band. He's from some group, or he's
Shell has played with Vadruna. Um, he's played with Vadruna. I can't remember how many shows or tours he's done, but he's done a fair bit. And then he was actually Shell's actually quite an interesting character for anyone who likes this kind of music, because you should know who he is, because he together with a guy called Gustav Holberg, from a band called Astral Side, and Maria from Heilung and a few others, they were like the original Viking music creators. So they were the ones who started throat singing and drumming and all the kind of stuff. Shell's brother, Benny Broughton from Folket Borta von Ordevinden, who always plays at Midgardblod, and a lot of the guys who play with him, they were sort of the OG Viking musicians, if you will, for lack of a better word. So you should know who he is. Definitely, everyone go check out those guys. But they started doing this at Viking markets and so on back in the early 90s, I think, mid 90s maybe. But so yeah, so with Nebala as well, I don't know how much of a challenge it was. I felt what was a really big challenge in the last couple of years was doing the Northman project. That was a big challenge. And it came about quite randomly, actually. I was contacted by what is called a music agent, who's someone who finds musicians for different projects, basically. So she'll be hired by a film studio to find the musicians that can fulfill whatever they need sonically for whatever project it is. And I was just contacted by her, and she wrote, we would like you to come and do some singing for an upcoming new Viking epic movie. And to be completely honest with you, at that point I was like, oh, I just left Heilung, and I had sort of wanted to go a slightly different direction with Nebala and so on. And I was like, another Viking thing is probably going to be cheesy. It's probably not going to be, whatever. But then I spoke to the main composer before I went to do the first session for this movie. And he was a really cool dude. And he told me who the director was. When I found out it was Robert Eggers, who had done the Witch at that time, and who was coming out with his second feature, The Lighthouse. I got really excited because he's a very different type of director. He's an art house director, basically. He has a lot of integrity in his art, I feel. So I was like, I got hopeful. I was like, okay, this might actually be really cool. And so I got to the session, and I literally got the text that I had to recite in this particular way that they wanted me to recite it the night before at 10 o'clock. And I had to be there the next day at 12 in the morning. So that's the time I had to rehearse this stuff with the different instructions that they gave. So when I came into the studio, and I was there were some actors, there were some of the actors from Game of Thrones were there, and there was like famous people there in that room. And I was sitting in that control room and waiting for some of the other musicians that were playing to basically just to set it up. This was a session to create some sounds that he could then go and show the studio and say, hey, this is how this movie's going to sound, more or less. The Robert Eggers, the director. So when it was my turn, I remember, okay, now I have to go in and I have to perform for all these people with this textual material that I literally just received. And there was a little hallway between the control room where everyone was sitting and listening and the actual recording room. And I remember walking into that, and when the door closed behind me, it got completely dark. And I just froze for what felt like forever. I started getting really embarrassed because I thought, shit, man, I think I've lost my way inside this hallway or something. But what I was feeling was like an insane nervousness. But then I remembered that this is what I do. And if I feel so nervous that I'm stopping myself right now, why am I doing this at all? So I gathered up the courage and I went in, and I must have done a good job, because they called me back a week after and offered me a part in the movie, and also wanted me to write some what you call the diegetic music. Diegetic music is music that appears in the movie, so it's not music that's just running in the background. It's someone taking an instrument and playing something. That's what you call diegetic music. So they wanted me to write some of that music and to sing some more on the score and all that kind of stuff. And to write that music was really hard because I was allowed to. There was this one track that I had to write for me and Isadora Bjarkarsdottir, who's Björk's daughter, which is the scene in the movie that I'm in. And this text from a saga called Bosa Saga, which is a very lewd sexual saga. And that was, by the way, totally random. But they didn't know that I was writing a whole album about sacred sexuality at that time. They had no idea. They still gave me the most pornographic old saga to make a song of that should be in the movie. So that was kind of funny. But the thing is that lyric was not written to be put into music, if you know what I mean. Some of the stuff from the Eddas and from Hávamál and other parts of the sagas and so on are written in a different kind of meter, which makes it more easy to translate that into something rhythmic and into something musical. But this one was not. So that was a big challenge to try to see, how do I even work with this so that it sounds like it could have been a song that was written by some funny old, slave around the year 1000 in Iceland, and the only thing we had to use as rhythm was milk pails. So how do you do that? How do you take a wooden milk pail and make a rhythm with the stick, And there was all these kind of different funny challenges and working on the set as well, and the constant changes. We don't like this now we need to do something else. And then there was this track that they had written for the Berserker scene. So the Berserker scene, that you remember that when they change into the wolves, into the bears and so on, that was written as a choreography, right? So that's a whole choreography. Like, so everything is done by this Gabriel, who's a fantastic choreographer, and Steven. And they made the choreography, but when they made the choreography, all of a sudden it didn't fit to the track that was made for the choreography. So what Robert told me to do was if I could come out and just stand with the frame drum and then just throat sing to the rhythms that they want them to do. And so then they would take what I did with the drum and the throat singing and create a whole new track based on that. So that was the basis of a new track that would then be fitted to the Berserker scene. That was a great challenge as well. Like, imagine standing outside in October in Ireland. It's cold, really cold. It's like 2 degrees, and just throat sing for 5 hours. That was, and to keep the energy every time they said cut. Now back, bring that energy again. Like what you did before, that was really good. Do that again. It's like shit, like constantly you have to like get into that vibe. That was super challenging. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your questions, but I think the Northman was the most challenging. It was the thing that was most outside of my comfort zone, if you will. But therefore also probably one of the most exciting things that I've done in a long time, I would say. So yeah.
I think this movie is amazing. I love every scene, and the scene of the musicians playing the instruments, you and the Isabella, the daughter of Björk, is very, very, very amazing to saw
Yeah,
that.
I agree. Oh yeah,
Because
another thing that was challenging, getting into that scene was, first of all, I was doing a very erotic scene with Björk's daughter, who was 17 at the time. So there was a lot of like, okay, what is okay to do? There was a lot of that talking before, so that everything was fully consensual and everyone felt safe in doing that. I mean, we weren't taking each other's clothes off, but we had to like really pretend that we were like, flirting and doing all that. And then Björk was standing on a hill looking at me doing this. And I'm a huge Björk fan, right? Like I've loved Björk since I was like 14 or something like that. So I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And then thirdly, Anya Taylor-Joy and all the other slaves were dancing around me as well, you know? And I remember there's one point where, you know, where I was just about to start my part of the singing, and then Anya comes like this and then looks at me in this very cute way, right into my eyes. I literally lost the plot for a second there. Like I was like, oh wait, it's me. Oh, no. So that was pretty challenging as well.
Oh, that's so cute and funny.
Yeah.
When I saw the scene, the chemical with the two characters are so fun and beautiful at the
Mm,
same time, because they sing, the latter have some sexual content, but
mm.
it's amazing. So that is the dance is different. Is a moment that the movie show a different perspective. Is a
Yes.
moment that they can make how can I say, a little party with all day, and they are have a moment of when they can be themselves. They don't can be
Yeah.
only slaves, but they
Yes.
are being themselves and playing together, have fun together,
You're
because
absolutely right.
and that's make the one of the most beautiful scene, the best scene, and this scene I think it was one of the most beautiful of the movie.
I'm really happy you're saying that. I mean, really, really, and I'll tell you another like little bonus info about that scene, because as you can probably imagine, like especially Alexander and Anya, you know, they were the kind of stuff that they had to do was really tough. A lot of it, right? Like it was really tough nature, tough weather, a lot of like just depressing, you know, like crazy shit happening and so on. The circus scene was insane as well. Imagine these big guys, right? Like they're mostly almost naked, and it's 2 degrees, and there's a rain machine as well. It's just they were miserable afterwards, right? They were happy, they were content because they'd done a good job, but they were also miserable. I mean, their bodies were like cold, and yeah. So the whole movie was made up of a lot of these intense, like hard scenes to do. And what both Anya and Alexander told me was that scene, doing this scene with me and Isadora, was the most enjoyable scene that they had done. Like it was the most fun they had had on set, where it was just fun. Because you know, in between when they were resetting the cameras and so on, you know, I would then, you know, keep, because we needed to keep an energy of party the whole time, right? So I would go out and I would tell some stories from Nordic mythology and do a little bit of storytelling and make people laugh, so that when they would dance around, the laughs that would come out would feel natural. They would feel like they're actually laughing. They're actually having a good time, right? So we were really just having a really good time, right, as a shooting that scene. So it's great that that shines through as well. That it really shines through that this is a scene where it's a different aspect of the story. It's like a little breather in this intensity that's going on. It's like, oh, okay, they can also just dance around and have fun. Okay, fine. You know, that's possible as well. You know, so yeah, I was really, really happy to be a part of that scene, and I'm happy that just like shone through into the movie. That's really nice.
Yes, and one of the most interesting things too is the transition of some scenes. Example, we have this scene that represents a moment of celebration or confraternization with the Slavs, slaves, and the slaves are in this process of that are many things that are occurring in the farm, and the character of Isadora have this moment of music, but next have a moment that she will be sacrificed,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
this wasn't the point that I think the public was seeing was, oh my God, she will die or no, but Amleth appear and saves her,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah.
oh,
I
thank you, God.
know.
And she was, how can I say, um oh my God, the word for that, he was too tired for, and they are very close to kill her, but we have this moment that I'm left
Mm,
in bed and making kill to every person that were made in this ritual, and she's saved by that. And in
yeah.
the end we saw that the moment of Melkorka and the others, and the others characters are putting fire in the house, the farm, the
Mm,
long house in the farm, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
that's these transitions of scenes are very very interesting, because it's beginning with happy things, but the things to the end will be the most difficult things
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the perspective of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I think that is a bit of a stroke of brilliance as well, for sure. I mean, that's what he does so well, like I think he just immerses you into a world. Like it's like when you're in The Witch, it's really like you kind of feel that you are in that time. Like he's really good at portraying that. And that's another thing, I was very inspired by Robert's by talking to Robert about his process, because his process is this, like, doing all the research to create a world within which he can tell a story. I remember him saying at some point, that he didn't have the patience of someone like Tolkien to create a whole world from scratch. So to do this whole research thing is extremely big part of his creative process, which I think also is why the worlds that he does end up creating are so believable. Like you're so immersed into it. I think another thing that he does really well in The Northman is that he kind of plays again, and he does that in all his movies, but he plays again with that thing where you don't really know what is going on inside the actors' heads and what's actually going on outside. Like another scene that I was involved with is the scene where he goes to see the sorcerer. Do you remember that scene? He goes to see a sorcerer who has the head of the Willem Dafoe's character. Uh, oh God, what was it now? I forgot his name. But the trickster character, basically. And he comes into the cave, and the Ingvar Sigurdsson, who plays the role. He's playing on a drum and throat singing. Do you remember that scene?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I remember.
just before he goes to the big monster with the sword, and that scene as well. Is he really meeting this guy, or and is he really going down to fight this thing, or is it just a kind of thing that's going on in his mind? That's I really love the way he plays with that. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's more or less what I wanted to say, basically.
Yeah, well, very curious about that, because the characters are Slavics, but the song that they play are much more Nordic music. This is was they are, I don't know, the idea if is the characters learning the Nordic music to play, or they compose in Nordic. How is the
No,
perspective?
but let me just, like, did I hear you correct that you think that all the slaves are Slavs?
Yeah, I was thinking that they
No,
are
no, they're
no,
not. They're
they
not.
are not
They're not. I
also.
think I think the only one who is specifically mentioned as being a Slav is Anya's character. She's Ukrainian. You know, she's from modern day Ukraine, basically. That's where they are. When they in the beginning of the movie, they are in somewhere on the Volga River, close to Kiev or something like that. So that's modern day Ukraine. That's another thing. Like for anyone who watches the movie, if it says ancient Russia or something like that in the subtitles, that is incorrect. That is a mistake. That is a incorrect translation. It is the Kievan Rus area, so it's Ukraine. Just so
Okay.
yeah. So just so
Okay.
we're clear about that. So Anya's character is Ukrainian, modern day Ukraine for sure. And they might be that some of the other characters could have been from that area as well. But in Iceland at that time, they would have slaves from Ireland. They would have slaves from Slavic countries. They would have slaves from whatever, mainland Europe, so on and so forth. My character, probably because his name is Øystein, that's how you would say it in Iceland. Probably Icelandic's gonna murder my pronunciation, but anyways, murder me for my poor pronunciation. But so that name is a Nordic name. So that means that he could have been someone who borrowed some money and couldn't pay it back, and then was told, well, you have to work for 10 years. Then okay, fine, whatever. He could be like an indigent servant or something like that. And I think Isadora's character was said to be from Ireland, probably. Again, this is not something that's get to know in the movie, but these are just things that we have to work with as actors and as performers to give a story to our character, so we have some kind of connection to our character, right? But these slaves could have been from everywhere, basically, not just Slavic countries. And of course, it stands to reason that if you come from a Slavic country and you come to a place where you're going to be a slave, you have to learn the language. Like, there's no way you can't learn the language, right? The same for an Irish person or whatever, you have to learn the language. So yeah, definitely, the slaves of that time would have had to learn the language of whoever was their master.
Yes, that's interesting because it's a thing that I was in doubt, because when I searched the origins of the characters that appear in the movie, they say that Melkorka is Slavic, with the character of Anya Taylor-Joy,
Yeah.
and I don't remember of Einstein. I think they don't say, but I was in doubt because they play a song that was Nordic, but some characters are Slavic, and I was in think that all they are Slavic, but that you said
Yeah.
they are Slavic, and
Yeah.
that's interesting that you say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't have any more doubt about that,
Of
because
course.
when I saw the first time, I think that they are always Slavics, but it's not like that. They are from many places in the scene.
Yep.
And to sing this song, how is they are created, or they are part of some saga? How these songs representing in the movie?
So the song that Isadora and I sing, I made that based on a excerpt from the saga called Bosa Saga. So it's made from an excerpt from that. When Ingvar Sigurdsson, who plays the sorcerer, he's singing a kind of chant or something in the beginning while he's sitting and banging his drum. That chant we made together. I was teaching him how to throat sing, basically. So we had like 10 sessions where he's a singer, he's a trained singer, so he knows how to use his voice. So it was not that difficult to teach him how to throat sing. He learned it fairly quickly. But to get that real tone into it, and also to take the lyrics that he got, which were lyrics that were composed for the movie by, again, God, I forgot his name. That's terrible. He's one of the big scholars as well, from Iceland. In terms of like terms of languages and so on. He's a big authority on that. So he composed that lyric for Sigurdsson's character. But we made that together in our sessions. We created, or I created it, and he interpreted what I created. Like I said, with the Bosa Saga thing, it was a very difficult task for me because I had to. First of all, I was told, I was sent some different things that I should draw inspiration from by the composers and by Robert Eggers. But basically, those things sounded horrible. Like it was like, they don't sound horrible, but it's like there was this one Finnish piece of music which is just a guy going like, I don't know what, I can't say the Finnish words, but it sounds like that, and it was basically just like this thing that just went like that all the time, and I was like, God damn it, I really have to make something that sounds ugly, and it sounds like I'm a drunken slave singing this, right? So that's why the song became like, if you've heard it, it's like, even to beat up, la da da da. It's like I've never written anything that bad in my entire life. It's really shit, but it's supposed to be because it has to fit the part of being, a drunken. These are not musicians; these are just people who sing and have fun, right? So yeah, that was a huge challenge. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, it's some of it was original from sagas, and some of it was composed for the movie as well, to say that for sure.
It's amazing. I love that you sing a piece of the song because it's amazing to hear. The song it's a very nice thing because I remember the movies many times. I think I watch of more than how can I say, I think and oh my god, how can I say, sometimes more 10 times of
More than
this,
10 times.
more than 10 times of this.
Wow, I'm honored, thank you.
And that's is amazing. I think I was thinking if it's 10 or 20 more 10 times because it's a lot of time that I watch,
Nice.
we watch just for found something new that I
Yeah,
was not seeing the first time. But oh my god, I
but it's
was.
such a rich tapestry that he's made, right? So there's so much stuff to discover. I get it. I get it. Totally.
Yes, and that's a fantastic thing that see, because we came saw that the movie bring us a perspective of a saga turned into a movie, turned
Yeah.
to a movie, not turned into a song that show a different perspective of the songs in that period. And just for us finish the interview, I'd
Mhm.
like to question you, and how we can say about the, how can I say, the future of some of the Viking Age music. We can have new bands. They will, can I say, they will appear in some periods. They will we have more and more bands
Mm.
to contribute with the scene. And how you think that we have will be new artists of this type of music? How you see the future for the Nordic music style?
That is a fucking great question. I have never heard, and no one's ever asked me this question. I really appreciate that question, actually, because it's something I think I thought about sometimes, because I got into this whole Viking music stuff a bit by accident almost. If you believe in accidents, I don't know if it was an accident, but a bit randomly. It was certainly not something that I had with me from when I was very small, except for all these general interests in spirituality and history and mythology and so on and so forth, and of course an interest in music since I was very small. But so I have also had the luxury a little bit of looking at it a bit from the outside, because a lot of the people that are into this music, it has been the Viking stuff or the Nordic spirituality, mythology, so on. It has been a huge part of their lives since they've been very small. Either they've gone to Viking markets, or they've grown up with it, like Einar Selvik, just around him, everywhere, and so on. Or done rituals since they were very young, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at it a little bit from the outside, and I have to say, if I'm completely honest, I hope that the thing that I want to survive from this movement, because all movements go up and they go down, right? So I think we are at the tail end of what this genre, as it is presented to us right now, can actually deliver. I mean, how many bands can there be that stand with some drums and some tagelharpa and go, oh no. I said, how many times can you reinvent that particular thing? And that's also why a lot of people are irritated, because there's a lot of people in the scene feel that there are a lot of posers, as they call them, right? And the people start becoming keepers, like what is real Viking music, and what has that real feeling, and this band over here, they're just doing it for the money, or this band over here, they're just. So that stuff is already happening. It's already becoming that industry of cool, right? And once that happens, then a movement dies. That's what kills a movement. That's what killed rock and roll. That's what killed whatever, grunge, and so on and so forth. But be that as it may, what I would really like to survive from this movement is that idea of dig into your culture, dig into your roots, see what there is to find. And mostly what you will find once you dig into your own roots, or into any roots for that matter, whether you are someone who is super interested in South American spiritual roots, you could be a German who's super interested in that and wants to go into those roots. The more you dig into it, the further you dig into it, the more you end up with something that I would say is a kind of human thing that seems to combine us all. A particular type of iconography, a particular type of looking at the world, which is similar everywhere around the world. My friend Rune Jan Rasmussen from the Nordic Animism channel, if you know who that is, he had a great video where he showed a similarity between a horse cock ritual that was written about from 1,000 years ago in Scandinavia, and a cock ritual from an Afro-Brazilian religion called Candomblé in Brazil, right? You know Candomblé?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that Afro-Brazilian Yoruba style, they had a particular cock ritual which was similar to a ritual that's 1,000 years old in Scandinavia. I mean, that kind of stuff is mind-blowing. And it just shows that we human beings are the same all over the world. We're all drawn to the same things, and so on. And so if this movement of Nordic Viking music, as we call it, inspires people all over the world to dig into their own culture, to creatively try to express something that comes from their culture and so on, I think we will show to the world, through the contextuality of all these different cultures, we'll show something which I would call perennial almost, or at least a couple of dynamics which are essential to being human. And that is a beautiful thing. So I hope that's the future of Viking music. It acts as an inspiration to the rest of the world to do this. And then we'll have much more different sonic sound spaces. We'll have the South American crazy groups that dress up like that and show this to the world. I think that would be fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was impressed that you know about Brazil. That's that's interesting that you know some things about Brazil. That's
I'm rooting for Portan on Saturday, by the way. Alex Pereira from the UFC. I don't know if you know who he is, but do you know who he is? Alex Pereira?
what
Do you know who Alex Pereira is?
yes, I know. Yes.
Portan.
Yes.
I'm a big UFC fan. I love the MMA and all that. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of a lot of the Brazilian fighters from there. Charles Oliveira, Alex Pereira, and several others throughout the ages. Anderson Silva. I mean, how can I forget? You know, great Brazilian MMA fighters. Yeah.
I was impressed that you like this, some things like this. It's difficult to see persons of I think from the Scandinavian countries like say, oh, I like this type of thing of Brazil. I don't see a lot of, but you know some things about Brazil.
Oh
That's
yeah.
very
I used to when I was younger. I used to play a lot of bossa nova actually.
wow.
Yeah. Se dança
Was
samba, se dança samba, vai. Se dança samba, se dança samba, vai.
wow. You know how can I say, you know some words in Portuguese. That's impressive. You pronounce it.
Brutal.
Yeah. And your pronounce it's okay. It's not when you sound it's don't have so much mistakes. We can
Okay.
listen well and understand.
Oh, nice.
And,
Obrigado.
and that's okay because some people have the, how can I say it, that we say the accent in the language, and the accent sometimes we saw that, oh, they not
Yeah.
sound like Brazilian. He is from another country, but when you say we say that you learn it very well, the
Ah,
word.
thank you so much. Thank you.
um and just I would like to asking you, do you like to play something or sing something? You can have this time to do
Oh no,
in the
no.
interview.
It's too early in the morning for me for that. I'm
Ah,
afraid.
okay. No
But yeah, well,
problem.
yeah. So no. I thank you, but I will refrain from doing that today.
No
Maybe another
problem.
time. Maybe another time.
Okay, no problem. It's because in the end of the interview, I asking if a person is musician. I ask if she like to play something or sing something, and it's an habit of the channel. I every ask
Mm, mm.
if they invited musician to play, but no
I can
problem.
do I can do one thing actually. Let me not be so boring. I can do one thing, which is something I'm working on that might come onto the next album, which is just I'll just show you one part of the melody. It is from the island I grew up, and it's a song about being a little boy who is supposed to be a sheep herder, but who messes up and. The melody goes like this. It's quite a pretty melody, I feel. It goes like this. Jag var liten båda, jag skulle vårda får. Jag vårda får, jag vårda får. För jag var liten båda.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's a pretty little melody, isn't it?
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with that. So I might be playing around with that on the next album. Oh, this is very teaser. Woo.
That's amazing. Very beautiful. The melody. It's fantastic. Jonas, thank you so much for being here in the channel to doing this interview. It's a big pleasure. Is
It's a
the
pleasure,
first
Marcia.
person. Thank you. It's the first person that I bring of the Northman movie to the channel.
Oh, cool.
Uh, and that for me was fantastic because I love the scene that you appear, and when you accept to come to the channel, I was, oh my god, that's amazing. He will come
Oh,
explain about music, about his appearing in the movie. I think it was fantastic this interview. It was very very amazing.
pleasure.
I am so grateful for that.
It was a pleasure, Marcia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will just stop the recording